All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of ZMS as we are live for the first V-Cycling News broadcast. I'm going to be your co-host, Mike Lister, and I'm here with Riley Harvey. Good evening, Riley.
Good evening, Mike. Looking forward to an interesting evening of racing. Got some nice climbing tonight.
Should be a good one. Yeah, it should be a good one. So this is the Team3R series, Tour of Sicily, using Magic Roads. They've been 5 races so far, 5 stages on the island of Sicily, on the south of Italy. So today, stage 6, and we've got a 26.4 kilometre race for you, and there's 600 metres of climbing. So you can see it there, starting on the coast, and it comes south inland, up a bit of a climb, then there's a little bit of respite, a little bit downhill, up a little bit more, and then down towards the finish line. So yeah, looks like it could be an interesting race. We'll see how many people are in the peloton at the foot of that climb, but a few chances to attack. Have you had a look at the start list, Riley? Anyone that you've got your eye on?
Well, first off, I think it's interesting that we're leaving the finale instead of arriving at the finale. There's some riders who've been regularly taking part in this event. I think Tim Cook is one of the favourites to win. Paul Pudel as well is looking likely. They're probably both going to be challenging for the win on this one.
Yeah, and Jay Luke as well. I think he's right up there as well, isn't he, on the GC? Currently 4th at the moment. So we'll bring you up to speed with all the GC as we go through the event and see what the permutations are. I think that Paul Pudel from OTR, he's currently the leading rider, and I think he might have the whole series wrapped up because it takes you 4 best results, so it might be a bit difficult for others to catch him. But we're about 30 seconds out from the start of the race. Oh, there's Paul, he is in the race, that's good to see. So he's going to complete all 6 races, and yeah, 26.2 kilometres we've got lined up for you, and we're about 20 seconds out from the start of this race.
Yeah, Luke Jeffries, I've raced with Luke quite a few times. He's got quite a lot of power. I think he's going to probably struggle a little bit on the climbs. Be pushing quite a lot of power on the climbs and then shut it off. It's worth noting that this is a 3.2 watt limited race, so it's designed to be for racers of slightly lower power, a bit more competitive down the ranks. I don't know what I'd equate to in a cat. Yeah, it's designed to be a bit more competitive for the lower, slightly slower racers. Right,
we're off then, and yeah, there's Paul Pudel taking the initiative straight off at the front. He's the series leader, and he's the one who's made a big, bold effort off the front of the race starts. And as you mentioned, it's supposed to be limited to 3.2 watts per kilo average. So that's based on your 1 hour FTP divided by your weight in kilograms. And yeah, you should be maxing out at 3.2. So I know Derek gives a little bit of a leeway, but if you're well above that during the race, then he certainly will be looking to disqualify you. This is a race that's designed for sort of more entry level and making the events nice and interesting for those riders who ordinarily might just be spat out in some of the very top end events. So it's good to see these sort of events on the calendar, giving everyone a chance for some competitive racing. So,
yeah, we all want the opportunity to win.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all want competitive racing. We all want to feel like we've got a chance. So a variety of events on the schedule is always good. Already we can see A Pay from the Portuguese rider here going off the front. He's putting out some interesting power at the moment, over 5 watts per kilo steady. And Pudel and Crichton looking to try and bridge across to him there, but as we hit this first little bump, 4% gradient. So Pudel come across there from OTR E-Racing team. Easy to spot with their bright green stripes on their kit. And,
I know that APE was in the test event that was happened recently for RGT Physics, and I would have said, going off the results that they put out in that test event, although it wasn't a race as such, I think that there's a good chance they'll be disqualified at the end of this event.
Yeah, it's a shame that at the moment we don't have that sort of auto selection for when you enter a race. It can't automatically determine if it's you're above the correct category or not. But hopefully, you know, it's a shame that people can't read the race descriptions. 3.2 is doesn't matter what language you speak. Numbers are pretty uniform and pretty easy to read. But we'll see how this develops. And Paul going across with him here, holding the wheel at the moment, but still pretty grouped in behind, looking from 3rd down to 10th place there, 25 metres between them, being a little bit strung out on this early hill. But we'll see if it comes back together over the top and they can regroup on the downhill before the first climb that properly starts a few kilometres into the race.
Yeah, we've not got ourselves into the true climbing yet. This is just one of the earlier slopes. Just a little leg tester, break things up a little bit.
An aperitif.
Sitting in on Luke Jeffries there.
Yeah, it looks like he's conserving a bit of energy there. Interesting that you mentioned it's Luke Jeffries. I didn't recognise it when J. Luke. Obviously, people are like mixing their names around. But I did have a little look at his record on RGTDB, and he did quite a few rides with Kate and the Transamerica bike ride. So he's been putting the miles in.
Yeah, definitely got some miles in the legs. Chris Little is quite a common appearance, common regular on RGT rides as well. He's been on quite a few rides with Kate as well recently. So there's some well-used legs out there.
Well, just looking at the overall leaderboard, so yeah, Tim Cook is currently leading after 5 races. I kept saying Paul Poodle, but I know he has won a couple of races. Oh, there he is in 5th place in the overall rankings at the moment. Luke Jeffries up there as well. Mike Wareham, he's currently there looking for a podium as well. So I've got a few people with skin in the game today. They're all looking to solidify their final ranking. So this is stage 6 of 6. This is the final stage.
As expected, Ape's broken away at the front there. Paul Poodle is drifting back to the pack, whether he's done that consciously or not. I think he probably has realised himself that Ape was not in the same league as these guys. He should be, if he's pointing out those figures, he should be in a Cat A race. He should be racing with other guys, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if that is what Paul has done, that's very sporting of him. It's good for him to recognise that nice and early, come back into the pack and make a fair race of it as well, not take any unfair advantage from slipstreaming a stronger rider up the race. So we can ignore that rider for our coverage. We'll put word back to the broadcaster and the cameramen, get the motorbikes away from him, don't give him any coverage. We don't want to see that. Although it looks like he's easing off now, unfortunately, and coming back into the pack, they're catching him up.
Worth noting as well that there is extra points at the halfway mark. There's an extra point at the halfway mark, which I believe will be important in this race to potentially switch the race leader. If I'm not sure who it is, if one of the riders picks up that extra point, then goes on to win the race, then they will leapfrog into the lead. But it is required.
Yeah, so that first climb starts at 6 kilometres into the course, and then it rises up for about 6.5 kilometres, and then that actual sprint point that you're talking about is actually 500 metres after the summit. It's on the downhill, so if you make a little attack before the top, you could have enough momentum to take you down to that sprint point. But we'll see how it develops on that climb, see if it sticks together. It does start off
6 kilometre points. 6k points, just where we break from the coast and start going inland there and start climbing as you go.
Yeah, I'm looking at the profile and it starts off a little bit steeper, not too steep, sort of 6%, 7%, and then it eases off a little bit. So that's just for the first kilometre, then it drops back down to 4%, and then 2% for the next 3 kilometres, and it starts to ramp up again. There's another 6% section within the last kilometre, but there's nothing too crazy here, no double-digit stuff, maybe just the odd 20 metres here or there perhaps, but your overall averages for each 500 metres, there's nothing above 6%, so could be quite a fast climb, even for these guys at 3.2 watts per kilo. And you'll find as well that on the climb, that's when they'll be putting their effort in, so they will be a little bit over those limits. That limit is based on your average over the whole course, not just on the climbs.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention it's an averaged watt per kilogram. I'm probably racing around this class if I actually do any time on the bike. But on the hills, on ascents like that, I'd be expecting to put out probably 4.5 watts per kilogram. But doing that effort on the way up, I have to shut it off and rely on gravity on the back side of those climbs. I'm not putting any effort in. I'm recovering fully on the descents because I just can't keep up with the lighter riders unless I've got that kick in me to get up on the elevation.
You also find as well with the drafting dynamic that can create a little bit of a saving as well, can't it? So that will help bring your average back down on those descents and on those flatter sections. So we've got a couple of riders off the front here then. And then a little chase group, 16 seconds back.
Got Birch and Mike Wareham there. Mike Wareham's done quite a few of the stages. I've got him down. He was finished on the podium in stage 2, in stage 3. Took thirds in both those stages. So he's got good form on him at the moment.
Gary Birch, he's currently in 11th place overall in the rankings, so there's an opportunity here for him to get into the top 10. One of the 3R riders, 3R being the race organisers. Derek Bucock, let's make sure we mention him as the event organiser. He's put all this on, he's created the 6 stages and done all the results collation. So a shout out to Derek for all the work that goes on to do that as we now hit the base of this first part of the climb then.
Yeah, it's a good shout out for Derek there. It does take a lot of time to put these races together, a lot of promotion, a lot of effort put in on Facebook to make sure that people actually know about them and turn up to them. It's very important. If you want to have a race, you need people there to race.
Right, back at the front of the race then, looks like Hayes has gone off the front, so we've got a proper race in behind. We've got Noble, see his stats there on the screen, 159 on the beats per minute on the high. Actually just dropped 1 beat per minute there, so normally I'd expect that to be ramping up, not dropping slightly, so we'll see how he gets on there.
Paul just pushing out some high power now. He's seeing a bit of a chance to attack on these lower slopes, and he's stringing it out a little bit here.
Well, you can just see as well that 6.7% in the top right hand corner, but the speed is still fairly high, 18 kilometers per hour. So that's 10-11 miles per hour in old money. I'm not seeing it dropping down below 10. Sometimes on the steeper slopes, the speed can really get scrubbed off. But they're keeping the speed fairly high for these lower slopes.
And you see that there's still some drafting effect even on the slopes here. Paul Padell's getting a little bit of a draft there from Noble coming up to his side. Only tiny, a few watts here and there, but it all helps.
So we're already 6.5 kilometers into the race. That's a quarter of the race done. 100 meters of climbing done, but 500 still to go. You see there, just touching 7.6% there. A lot of these riders, you can see the red numbers on the left hand side up above their FTP, so 120% or greater of your FTP, that was then that number red. doing fairly well at staying bunched together at the moment, this little group. There's maybe a tiny little gap forming there. Nothing major at this early stage.
Worth making a mention that this live stream is brought to you by ZMS Livestream. If you see them on Facebook, give them a like and a follow. And it's also being broadcast on estv.co. That's estv.co. It's Electronic Sports TV, which is a 24-hour live streaming platform of all types of electronic sports.
Yep, you can get the app for that on your live streaming service. I've downloaded it. It's on Amazon. On the Fire Stick, we can download that, and then you can watch it on your TV. Lots of other apps as well, like Hulu, I believe. Other broadcasting services carry the ESTV broadcasting app. So yeah, give that a check, because we will be broadcasting more often on that as well. So we just see here, Wareham and Birch. Where I'm just doing the pace setting here, Birch hanging on behind. Just
doesn't look like Wareham's going to be. Yeah, doesn't look like it's going to be a podium day for Wareham today.
No, and you can just see the bar underneath his name. Wareham's got the yellow bar, Birch has got the green bar, just showing that Birch is perhaps putting out a little less effort, but maintaining that similar speed to Wareham. We might just be measuring that effort at this stage.
Yeah, well, whilst we've got a good portion of the race done, there is still a decent descent and then another strong climb. If you have measured your pace right and go into that climb, you could really mop up all the guys on the ascent there. You've just put in a little bit too much effort too early on in the race.
Well, we can see that a little bit of a gap form then. So second down to fifth. Just see it there, look. These four guys now getting a little bit of a gap back to Cook. Looks like he's got one rider for company and another little gap further back, which I think was Chris Little.
So Padel has paced this quite right then. He's managed to pull a few guys away to work with him. I don't think any of these guys that are in this group with him are looking like they're contesting for the win on this series. So if he can keep them together, working with him, and keep away from Cook, then he will more than likely have this wrapped up today. You can see Cook's putting in the effort there. Cook's putting in the effort there. His numbers are going red. He's trying to force his way back into the group there. You can see what he needs to do.
Yeah, Cook and Jeffries both in the top 5 in the series standings, trying to close that gap back up, and they need to do that really before they hit that 12.5k point, because that's when you get the downhill coming, and when you're in a little group you get that draft effect, and if you're on your own that will certainly see you losing more distance on the road and that gap increasing. But looks like they're doing a good job at bringing that back together.
And Crichton had dropped out of that front group there. I didn't notice him, he didn't have his name above his head, so yeah, they've just picked up Crichton, so it's a 3v3 at the front.
Yeah, it certainly looks like that is coming back together. Chris Little definitely distanced at this point, 100 metres further back. You can just see him rounding the final corner there, but he just needs to pace himself, manage that effort. He's got a good 600 metre lead over Wareham and Birch, so he could still be on for a good amount of points. I'm currently on the more slightly gentler slopes, 2-3% at this moment, and this will continue up until about 9.5k to go. Well, not to go, 9.5k into the race, and then it will kick up again a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of more extreme elevation there, more extreme gradient before a little flat, and then it goes again.
So it might just be that Cook and Jeffries, they're just able to use this, or is it, it's opened back up again there slightly, but perhaps they're just using this slightly flatter part of the course. These might be slightly heavier riders with a bit more power, but able to power along on the slightly flatter sections and bridge across. They might see themselves getting dropped again once it gets onto the second half of this climb and the steeper sections.
You could see there that Cook and Luke Jeffries, they saw what they needed to do. They've put a little bit of extra power in here and regrouped. Paul Padell's pushed on again as soon as he's seen them arrive in the group. Whether anyone else is going to go up with him again and form second group, but I think Cook and Luke Jeffries are well aware of the fact they don't want to get distance at this point.
Yeah, looks like Padell's just done a little bit of a counter-attack. He's seen the effort that they've made to get back across. Just waited. They think they might get a little bit of rest, and he's pushed off the front. Just when
and instantly those gaps have started to open up back again now. So you've got Crichton, Cook, and Luke Jeffries there. Again, that little bit of a gap. Padell is like you say, he's timed that counter really well. Pushed on, dragged his two workmates with him, and just opened the gap back up again after Cook and Jeffries thought they were going to sit in and have a little bit of a breather. And they've had those dreams dashed.
We can just see as well that gradient kicking back up again a little bit, 5.5% now. We've just dropped to 4.5%, but we've had a couple of kilometres of 2%, so this again could be that Padell's just using the gradient. He's just seen it's getting a little bit steeper, that's where he's put his effort in. Made that little push and opened that 30-metre gap back up.
Probably just worth mentioning to the viewers that this is a magic road. It's using generic scenery that's created by the computer program itself. This is not the actual scenery of the road, but you can put in any GPX, any gradient that you want, and you can create courses from all over the world and have fantastic scenery to ride through, but you're riding the gradients of the area that you're riding. The actual scenery isn't the same, but the gradients of the road are very well replicated. And this road's been made by Samir Dorlatli, SMR Magic Roads, and Samir's got a bit of a reputation in the RGT circles for his diligence with creating the Magic Roads and his efficiency of how well he makes them and how well replicated they are to the actual routes that they're based upon.
Well, I don't know how much of a chance the riders have to appreciate that. I'm sure they're working hard as they go up this climb. Now Noble taking over from Padell. He's put a little bit of an opening there. But these three now pulling away from our second chase group. We've got 3 versus 3, but that gap's opening up now. And Chris Little just doing well. He's still 100 metres behind that second group of 3, so that gap hasn't gone out. Just holding position there.
Yeah, Mike Wareham and Birch have dropped really far back now. They're 500 metres off the back. They're forming a gruppetto there. I don't think they're going to be challenging today for podium places at all.
Well, 10k in. 20 minutes gone. We've got 16k left to go. Our nominal race leader is 1.3 kilometres up the road, so yeah, we'll be discounting him, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance that even averaged out his power is going to be at the correct levels for the course.
Yeah, he might need to stand still for 10 minutes, I think, to allow that average to come down. I don't think we'll be seeing that happening.
You might need to jump on a scales after the race, just check what's going on.
Need to get him signed up to the ebiopassport.com, get a weigh-in uploaded and get his equipment registered, all part of the Fair Play initiative on RGT. That's a separate website where riders can upload real life weigh-in videos to show some verification, show that they really are the weight that they say they are, what their equipment is, and it gives people a chance to have a look at them and sort of validate them and have some confidence in their electronic performance is the same as their real life performance.
So we're
55-year-old man. This is, I was just going to say, really, for a 55-year-old, not to take anything away from that, but yeah, it pays putting out 5.6 to 6 watts per kilo. That's pretty impressive for someone of that age, I would say. So it might be just a miscalibration. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. You might not just know how to set up his equipment properly, so it might be just slightly misreading, and that's having this effect.
Just went through that flatter section we mentioned earlier on, just after the 10k mark, and it started kicking up again. So we've got another about 1.5 kilometers till we crash this climb and starting on the descent, and that's where we should be getting to the halfway marker and the extra point that's available. Have you had a look at the scoring system? Derek's been experimenting with a slightly alternative scoring system on this race series. He was trying to work on something that didn't penalise you as much if you missed one race, because with busy life schedules, I think everyone's aware that it can be difficult to hit every single race in a series, and he was working on something that would maybe just not wipe you out if you did happen to miss a race. You could still be competitive.
Yes, I think it's your 4 best results from these 6 events, so you can drop your 2 worst results. So Tim Cook at the moment, he's probably not worrying too much. He's currently in 6th place, so this would be one of his worst results, which is not bad going, considering 6th is not. It's still pretty high up, because he's had 2 wins, a 2nd, and then 2 4th places. So he's currently got a nice healthy lead at the top of the table. So yeah, I think he's probably feeling okay at the moment. But Steve Noble here, if he gets a good result today, he'd wipe out an 11th place and a 19th place. That'd be his 2 worst results, so that could really see him moving up the table.
So it is important.
Paul could now as well. So Paul has a 13th and a 19th as his current 2 worst results, and a 7th, a 1st and a 3rd. So looks like he could be also moving up the table quite nicely.
It's looking like there's a strong chance it'll be contested between these 2 riders as well, Noble and Padel. They've opened up a nice little gap. I think it's looking around about 90 meters back to the next rider. It's looking quite good.
Yeah, they're going to be. Looks like it can be pretty close for those 2 in the overall standings. So that bonus point is all to play for. We just hit a little bit of a 9% gradient there. Noble just with a little burst in front. With Poodle with eyes. We can just see in the top right hand corner on the elevation chart, you can see the top of the climb now coming into view. The riders will be keeping an eye out for that, waiting for that to arrive.
Gear selection over the top of this ride as it eases off, getting into the right gear and making sure you're keeping the power down as you go over the top and keep your speed into the descent. Very important. We'll see which one of these riders is most held by gravity as well when we go over.
Well, with just these 2 as well, it could be that it makes sense to put in a little bit of an effort just before the top of the climb, try and break that elastic as opposed to trying to rely on a sprint on the downhill. It's about a 3 kilometre downhill section.
We're back with Jay Wadey there. He seems to have made some progress away from his group, but possibly stuck in no man's land. It'd be interesting to see whether he can manage to actually catch up with Padel, or whether he ends up dropping back to the Crichton Cook group.
Yeah, and Chris Little's still not that far behind those guys, so a good little burst on that downhill, and that could see him come back into contention with those guys. There he is. He's less than 100 meters behind that little group. He's done well just to hold position up this climb.
I think at 100 meters he will be able to, on a straight, he will just about be able to see the riders in front of him.
He might just want to bide his time a little bit, but once you get to the top of that climb, it might be worth just digging a little bit deeper, going a little bit into the red, because you will get some recovery on that downhill. If you can close that gap, it might just give you a little bit of mental motivation that you need on the second part of the climb, that you're a little bit closer. Maybe just break the will of those 3 guys ahead of you a little bit. Birch and Wareham still working together.
Formed their own little gruppetto at the back there. Just enjoying this ride. Perhaps this is one of the results that they'll be happy to have wiped out.
Right, that's what I'm just having a little look for. Yeah, so Birch has a 19th and 10th at the moment. So for him, if he can grab 19th, that will be a 1 point benefit for him. And Wareham has 2 10th places, so grabbing the 9th for him as well is also going to be beneficial. So both of them fighting for that 9th place.
Tim Cook really wants to be with those 2 riders as they crest here. You know, a gap like that, and just going over the top can quickly turn into a few hundred meters on a descent with a pair working together.
There we go, there's the yellow banner. Who's going to take it?
We're looking like Noble's going to take this extra point.
Yeah, it looked like he timed it well there, used the draft from Poodle, just came over the top of him. Didn't give Poodle a chance to respond. So they're through the halfway point on this descent as well. You can see their wattage has dropped right off there. Soft pedalling, making sure they stay ahead of those following riders, but at the same time just having a little bit of a breather before we hit the second part of this climb.
So I've got the second part of the climb coming in at about 15.7 kilometers. And it looks like the early slopes have got some strong elevation to them, some strong gradient. So I think you'll see them coming to quite a standstill when they hit that. Be a good point to push because it's only a quick blip and then it flattens out again. So just see if anyone has a bit of an effort on those early slopes to try and snap the elastic.
Yeah, it doesn't look at all like a very consistent climb. It seems to be very undulating. There's some steeper sections, some flatter sections, maybe even a couple of little short downhill sections on this climb. So won't be one where you can get into a rhythm. There'll be a lot of variety as they take it on. Around about 8 kilometers overall. But once again, not overly steep. Like you mentioned, a bit steep at the beginning. But overall, around about 300 meters of climbing over that 8k, so 4.5% average over that distance. Won't slow them up too much once they get into the middle part.
We've just seen a little bit of sparring between Padel and Noble there. It seems to be one taking the front and giving a little bit of a push and seeing whether the other one matches it. Going steady at the moment, side by side, but it was just interesting to watch to see who was putting out the power and see if there was going to be a little bit of a break opening up there, testing each other's legs.
Might just be able to get a little bit of a slingshot off the bottom of this descent. See, easing up there, completely zero power from Noble as they come round that corner.
Big change in gradient coming up now. From that negative
Right,
3
we go
up to
down to the
positive.
climb.
That's a big change for your legs, from negative 3 up to positive 6%. All the numbers are going red.
Just in behind, Waddy's done well to maintain that distance to the 3 guys behind him. It's still, well, it's stretched out because of the climb, and because of the descent, but there's still a nice gap there back. So he's comfortably in 4th place at the moment. We'll give it 3rd place because we're not counting highs at the moment. So he's currently on the podium. That gap behind is shrinking as he hits the uphill and the others are still on the downhill. They're just about to hit the bottom of that descent. There they are. The red warning triangle. You see on there 5% average, that said. So hit the base of the climb. We can just see here how that 3 versus 1 just opened that gap up back to little. Now 200 metres between him and that group of 3. They would have got a little bit of benefit from the 3 of them working together, a bit of draft saving, then pushing on.
Yeah, descending in a bunch is much more efficient than descending solo. You make the most use of the guy with the weight in the group, and you can slingshot him, and as soon as you slingshot them, your draft drags them back in front, and you just do that kind of a reverse yo-yo, the slingshot, and just keep on pushing it on the descent, and you can open up gaps over a solo rider quite easily.
Alright,
Noble and Pedal seem to have gone a bit more stable again now. They're putting the power on the early slopes, just come back to something that's been more sustainable for them. You wonder how careful Pedal's being here. He's being tucked right in, seems to be quite often shutting his power off down to 0. When it goes down to that blue line below his name, he's virtually inputting, well, he's inputting very little into the trainer, but he seems to be doing that and just sticking himself back into the draft, tucking into that wheel, saving as much energy as he can. And you wonder whether he's just being a bit coy here. He's not taking a turn on the front for Noble. They know they're already the last 2 on the race, the last 2 that are challenging for the win, and these cat and mouse games starting quite early in this stage.
They've got a bit of a gap to play with, but Noble seems pretty steady here. So they're below that 3.2 limit fairly comfortably. Yeah, I've got a 350 metre gap back to Waddy here. He's got a comfortable 300 metre gap back to Cook, Crichton and Luke Jeffries. These 3 are going to have they look like they're working quite hard though. You can see they're in the orange and red bars under their names, whereas the front 2 were greens and yellows.
Just going back to the colours there, I think Ape is going into the bright orange, which is a neuromuscular, which I think you're only able to sustain for a few seconds at a time. He seems to be doing that quite comfortably, regularly.
Yeah, that certainly looks like he's not set up his app properly. He's not set up his FTP properly. He's been red numbers the whole way there. Up over 6 watts per kilo consistently. That's world tour level. Looked like he was up over 450 watts there. So yeah, that's very impressive. but like I say, probably miscalibrated equipment.
You just saw that Padel was down on his power, tucking in on Noble, and I don't know, there was a slight change in the gradient there, but Noble just opened up a gap, and Padel had to put down the power to close it. And sometimes for me, that can be harder to sustain, those constant changes in power to try and close the gap, rather than just doing a steady state effort. But they are just toying with each other now, seeing who's got the legs. Noble's trying to tuck himself into the draft, and Padel leave him out in the front, doing a little bit of leading now.
Yeah, Noble had to work a little bit harder there just to close that gap. Looked like Padel had just made a bit of an effort to pull it out. Yeah, like you say, with these undulating gradients, it's hard to get that rhythm. On a steady, consistent gradient, you can just tap it out at a nice pace. Once the gradient changes, you're changing gear, you're speeding up, you're slowing down, the cadence is changing. It looks like they found a steady section. See in the top left hand corner there the power line, the power graph for Padel. Currently at a nice steady white line there. You can see just before that there on the left hand side it was very jaggedy up and down as he was putting the power on, easing off the maintained position, but now he's just found a nice rhythm on this steady section.
Gap back to Waddy there, still seems stable. Waddy's playing in a great ride for a solo effort, and no draft assistance there. And it can be quite lonely on the road when you can't see the guys in front of you, and the guys behind are just a little bit too far away. You can't quite justify slowing to...
So
sorry, Mike, I was going to say...
Go on, you go.
I was just going to say, it's when you've maintained a gap for so long, you can't quite justify dropping back to make use of the draft from the riders behind you, even though you might be just on the limit yourself. But you just have to maintain and keep going solo.
Yeah, that is one of the good things, at least, about sort of virtual riding, is you can see everybody's position on the road. You can look at the leaderboard, it's all there, there's no guessing into the gaps. It's not like the real world where you're shouting over to the motorbike, what's the gap, what's the gap? Or you see them radioing back to the team car. You know, none of that guesswork. You can see exactly how big your gap is and whether it's going up, whether it's going down. So at this stage you can see Waddy's got 180 metres or so ahead of Cook. That gap is slowly closing, I would say, but got 8 kilometres that he's got left to maintain that for. That does include some downhill where he'll have the benefit. He'll get to the top first, but it'll be interesting to see if he can keep that gap.
I think Padel and Noble are just getting to a point on the climb now where I think it's going to ease slightly and become a slightly softer gradient. We'll see how the speed changes as we go into that. Also seeing now that Noble's got his heart rate monitor on, he's got 169 beats per minute. Quite a high cadence for hill climbing, or it's quite often your cadence is dropping down to 60 or 70. Padel's climbing at a lower cadence, and as that gradient's dropped slightly, you can see his heart rate's just eased slightly. It's dropping from 170 sort of mark down to 165 now. He's just catching his breath.
Yeah, I crept up a little bit. We were at 158, 159 earlier. As we go longer and deeper into this race, you will find your heart rate slowly creeping up. As you can see in the top right hand corner, that gradient chart just slowly easing off. Looks like they're about 1 kilometre to the next sort of flat section, and then there will be another kick before a bit of a downhill race to the line.
Just going back to a point you made earlier, Mike, about the eBio passport, that is open for anyone to register with. It's not a necessity, but it does avoid questions being raised about your performance. It's also quite a good idea to race with a heart rate monitor, so people can see that when you're putting the effort in and your speeds are increasing, they can see that your heart rate's increasing as well. Again, it's not necessary, but just it avoids a question. When you're not using a heart rate monitor, some people might be a little bit, oh, well, you know, we can't see that you're putting the effort in. Definitely something to consider. Not a necessity, but if you're competing and wanting to compete clean in the esports world, then it's something worth looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can see that your heart rate's rising when your effort's rising, it's a good indicator that it's a human being hooked up to the trainer and not a drill or something like that. It has been known that people, for whatever reason, fancy putting a drill on and making themselves ride off the front. But, yeah, these guys are well known across the RGT platforms, so we've got no qualms about the performance from Paul or some of these other riders. Just missed the pace up the road. He's a fairly new rider to these events, so we'll put him aside, take him into the commissaire's tent and scan his bike, check for a motor.
There was a rider in a race not so long back that fairly confident they were using an e-bike. It wasn't any special modification, but it does just make you wonder what people are doing. Also, another thing as well is if you're racing frequently, if you race under your own name with an open Strava profile, people can go back into your real world rides and see what performances you put in the real world. And again, you know, you might not feel it's necessary, but if you're in a race and you win it and someone starts questioning you, it's all there, it's all open. People can go back, they can see, they can put their own minds at ease without even asking you. Unfortunately, it's something that you have to look at in this day and age. Well, in all sports, in all racing, it's something that has to be looked at. And people get quite passionate about racing, about winning races, whether it's online or whether it's in real life.
Yeah, I know that when I'm racing, I'm always a little bit unsure about my performance because there's so many variables with the trainer, the setup, etc. So I do link my Strava, make that publicly accessible so people can go and see my performances out in the real world. They can see how I'm getting on Strava segments, and you know, I can see that I'm performing quite well on some of those, so it gives me confidence that my equipment is set up right. But there is always that in the back of my head. So things like the eBio passport, making it all publicly accessible, just helps take away some of those doubts. Back to the race here then, we see Cook just slightly getting gapped a little bit by Jeffries and Crichton. 20-metre gap. His heart rate's rising, he's just jumped a couple of beats, 174. Really trying hard, 175 to try and stay with these guys.
Yeah, I think there's just a momentary lack of concentration for Cook there, and he's had to put the effort in, and it could be that he'll pay for that slightly later on in the race, that little lack of concentration, losing the draft. Again, it's one of those things, you're going from saving 40, 50 watts in the draft perhaps. As soon as you lose that, you drop out, you're having to put in 40 or 50 watts to catch up, plus the 40 or 50 watts that you were having in the draft. So there's a big differential when you drop out of a group.
Well, he's made it back across. Got back in touch with these two guys. But he's not jumping on the front just yet, probably just catching his breath. Let that heart rate drop back down a couple of beats. And we'll see how he goes towards the finish.
Just mentioned there, it's a Team3R race. Team3R, an established team, they've come over to RGT, and Lou Jeffries, one of their members, he's sporting one of their kits on there. supporting World Bicycle Relief. Some nice kits in the game, the RGT original kits. Crichton's wearing the black with the white RGT on the back, and there's some more retro looking kits there, like Tim Cook's sporting a more retro looking kit. Well, it's probably a modern kit, but it looks quite retro to me.
Look like their speed has just increased a bit then. We saw the live data there from the broadcaster ZMS, and looked to me like they were up over 40 kilometres an hour, so perhaps just a little downhill section, bit of relief. And, now we've still got 6 kilometres to go, but we've done maybe 90% of the climbing, just under that. So I think we're reaching the top of this climb, and then we're going to have some downhill sections towards the finish line, so it could be quite a fast finish. Expecting this race to be under an hour.
I'm expecting to crest this hill at around about 23 kilometres.
So what's that, another kilometre and a half then? And that will give them about 3.3 kilometres downhill, with a little bit of a bump in the middle, so it will be a fast finish. We'll see if anyone has an opportunity to pull away from the others. We'll come down a bit more to your absolute power rather than your watts per kilo once they crest over that hill.
So I would be expecting, if it was me racing this in around about 1 kilometre, maybe slightly more, I'd be putting in a massive effort to get to the crest of this hill. And if I was Noble or Padel, I'd be trying to drop the man that I've been working with and leave them before we get to the descent, and then, you know, let gravity do its way with me, take me down there, can moderate my efforts to get away on the descent. Going back to the back of the race here, you can see that Birch has now dropped Wareham. He's 100 metres clear, and I think you were saying earlier, Mike, that both Birch and Wareham could really do with this 9th place to up them in the rankings, the overall stage, the overall tour rankings.
Yeah, that's right, both of them. If they take the 9th place, that'll be inside one of the top 4 results. So it's your top 4 from your 6 results that are taken towards the overall standings. So both of them could benefit from that 9th place. We'll see if Birch has gone too soon. Still look like they were a few kilometres behind these guys. So yeah, these guys are 2.5 kilometres behind the leaders. They're just hitting some of these flatter parts now. A little bit of respite. Negative gradients just allows them to rest up. You can't rest too much. This is where Wareham, they could keep the power on, close that gap a little bit.
Worth noting that there are still 4 stages left. Wareham has podiumed in the past, so it may be that he's looking for a stage that suits him a little bit better, and he's just not burning his matches in this race, just enjoying it. Looking back to 5th place here, and Cook has dropped Luke, Jeffries and Crichton. Made a push. He's got 50-60 metres on them now from the group that he was working with earlier on. From someone who was dropped by them a little bit earlier on, I think it was just a moment of lack of concentration by Cook there, the way he's just opened up a gap on them like that.
Yeah, we know Cook's got good form from his position in the overall leaderboard. So we were a bit surprised to see him getting dropped by these 2 guys. Looks like he's pushing on now. I'm just trying to get to the top of this climb before these guys secure his position on the road. It's easier to push on and then try and hold them off rather than being in a 3-way sprint position. It doesn't look like these guys are giving up easily. You can still see Cook up the road there. He's not out of sight just yet. That's going to give them hope that they can catch him.
Chris Lill's maintaining a solid gap there. It's been around the 100 metres mark for a while now, so you can just about see the riders in front of him there. It must be giving him some hope that he will catch them at some point. Keeping a steady pace, not burning all his matches.
Must be quite a horrible position to be in though. He's working hard, I'm sure, and he just isn't quite able to catch those guys ahead. Just see
it looks like he's keeping his power level steady, and he's not going for that, which would probably catch me out. I'd try and push on and catch up with those two guys and blow up shortly after I'd reached them. He seems to be doing a much steadier, much more considered effort.
Yeah, as we start to hit the top of this climb now, not far off, it might be time for him to make a move, knowing that he's got a little bit of downhill just to rest and recuperate before the finish. Might just level out some of the ability between these guys. So Cook is pushed on from these two. It looks like Waddy's still holding off the 200 metre gap. Back to Cook, and he's going to reach the top of the climb first, so he's doing well at the moment, maintaining that 4th position.
Padel and Noble have crested.
They're over the top, aren't they?
Padel and Noble have crested, and Padel's putting in an effort now. He's trying to break Noble, but it looks like Noble's put in just enough effort to get back to his wheel and get on that draft on the descent. Doesn't look like he's interested in putting his effort in just now. I think he looks like he's playing the safe game. He's going to stay with him until the final few metres, and I can see Noble here going for the sprint finish rather than trying to outpace him on this descent. It's going to kick up slightly in a second. We'll see how Padel reacts to that, and see if he does try and just break him on that little bit of a climb, small climb.
Well, yeah, I think that's where I'd be making my attack. Use that draft effect, slingshot past the rider in front. Depending, of course, if there's a corner or anything before that little climb. Here we are on the 1% then. 2% might not be steep enough to really make inroads. But they're both going for it, their numbers have gone red. But they're just maintaining those red numbers for a little bit longer.
1 km mark is there.
1 kilometre to go.
Noble's numbers went bright red there, which is bad sign. You're going too deep then when they go bright red.
Still together then. Poodle with the advantage on the road. Noble just trying to stay in that slipstream. Anything within 5 metres, he's getting the maximum draft. Above that, it starts to drift off. Just falling 10 metres, 12 metres there. He's working hard trying to get back on.
Will he get a slingshot though, just in time?
So with this downhill and the faster speed, we can see there that 60, 70, 80 watts saving.
Even at this sort of distance, he's getting a good draft here. I think he might have timed this right.
Oh, he's back under 5 metres. Inside 200. 1 corner left to go. This is it, 100 metres to go. Give it everything now, lads.
Oh, that was a photo finish.
Wow, that's a tough one to call.
I think Padel just held on there. Noble left it a fraction too late. It was very, very close.
That's certainly going to be one for the commissaires to adjudicate on. Here we have Waddy. He's still 200 metres ahead of Cook. He's put in a nice gap now to Crichton and Jeffries. I don't think Cook's going to catch Waddy at this stage. Only a kilometre to go. It's fast. Not really any climbing at this point. So almost Waddy can just roll home at this point.
Flam Rouge coming into sight for Tim Cook there. But Waddy looks like he's got this nailed. He's putting on a little bit of a sprint now just to make sure.
So there's 150 metres difference between the two of them. Cook was putting out some decent 400 watt numbers just then. I think if Waddy plays this right, he should be able to just manage that effort to the line. It's downhill. And Chris Little, look at that, he's almost back on with Crichton and Luke. He has Luke Jeffries. It looks like he has managed to bridge that 100 metre gap.
That's a great ride.
Yeah, there he
Chris
is. He's
Little.
above Jeffries now. It's a great little effort by him to come back into that position. So we've got a couple of moments to see Waddy and Cook cross the line. So it looks like Waddy will take third place. Comes around that final corner then. Looks like some of the Tour de France organisers have been planning the run into the line. So well done to Waddy taking third place there, and Cook dropped his climbing buddies just before the top of the climb. We'll come across fourth place.
Perhaps not the result that he wanted, but it was a good ride.
Alright, Riley, you can have this one. Take it home with these three guys then.
Got some lively stars now. Crichton's making a run for it with Chris Little, see how much power he had left. They're fighting between themselves. Chris Little's taken over Crichton and he looks like he's going to keep the power to the line. And Luke Jeffries just missed out on the slingshot there to bring it home. With little Crichton, Luke Jeffries with a tight finish there, but an excellent ride from Chris Little to moderate his power earlier on when the gap had opened up and bring home the guys, close that gap and get in there with them, get there to the finish.
Yeah, some very smart riding there by Chris Little, and you can see by the distance they went through the line. Jeffries and Crichton both had good finishing speed, but Little got there just in the nick of time. Looked like he was fading a little bit, maybe because he was a little bit tired after catching up and closing that gap to those two guys, but great ride there by Little to jump from 8th to 6th place in the last couple of kilometres. Now we've got Birch and Wareham. They're still a couple of kilometres from the end, but they are on the downhill section now, so it won't be long before they make it to the finish line. A couple more minutes and that'll be your top 10.
Yeah, Tim Cook and Luke Jeffries would have been saving massive amounts over in comparison to Chris Little there. Riding that little trio that they had going. So he's done really well to have caught them up and still had the power to take them at the line.
I'll tell you what, there's 1.8 kilometres to go for Gary Birch here, and Mark Wareham is riding hard. He's only 100 metres back. That gap is fluctuating a little bit, but it's not a massive gap. So you can see him pushing hard on the downhill. On the right hand side here, he's got the, well, just dipped to green there, blue as we go around these corners, but he was in the orange and red zone. There we go, back into the yellow, whereas Birch is in the blue zone there. So down to 60 metres and still 1.3 kilometres to go. Wareham's working pretty hard here, trying to gain that single extra point. I'll tell you what, I think he's going to catch.
It does look like he's going to make it back on. He's going to make it back on and pass.
That's the key thing, isn't it? He's got to keep pushing once he's passed. So he might be a little bit gassed. Might be Birch is just sort of sat up teasing him. And now he's seen the Flam Rouge and he's putting the power on. Look at that, open that gap back up. Red numbers.
Birch has seen the danger there. He's opened a sprint up very early there though. Let's see whether he can hold that sort of part of the line.
Yeah, it's an early sprint, but I think maybe he's just trying to break the spirit of Wareham there, just as Wareham's made contact. Got it back down to just single-digit metres behind, and then Birch has unleashed a big attack and opened it back up to 100 metres. That must be soul-destroying for Wareham. Can he respond in this last 500 metres to go?
He is responding, he's putting the power down again. Numbers are going red. Birch, it's a Team 3R event. Birch is a Team 3R rider, so it's one of his home events. He really could do with winning this for his team.
Getting that power back on. Back up over 200. But Birch, he was on 300 there for a second. He's got the greater power. I think he's just going to run out of road. Birch, he's going up to the final corner then. Responded well in those last couple of kilometres just to ensure he maintained that 9th place that he'd worked hard to, when he worked hard to create that gap back to Wareham. Look at that fast finish by Wareham again there. Same finishing speed as Little. Alright, Riley, why don't you take us through the final results?
So we've got Antonio Pace there finishing with 5.23 watt per kilogram average. So we're expecting that Antonio Pace will be eliminated from these results. So our first on the road is Paul Pudell, an OTR racer. And we've got Steve Noble and John Waddy, who are forming our first three. Tim Cook follows that up. He had a nice little ride there. He lost the front group, worked well with the 3 riders he was with, and then broke them to get away for 4th place. Chris Little finishing in 5th. Scott Crichton in 6th. Luke Jeffries in 7th. Gary Birch finishes in 8th. And Mike Wareham there gave us a little bit of excitement towards the end. We thought we might have caught Gary Birch, but looks like Gary Birch was teasing him somewhat, sitting up. And Mike Wareham finishes into 9th position.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I can't quite remember who we gave the win on the line to, whether it was Pudell or Noble, but it's Pudell on the leaderboard, 0.02 seconds ahead of Noble there, very tight on the finish line. So another win for Pudell. I think that's his 2nd win of the series. So as you mentioned earlier, this is a 10 event series, 4 more to go. So they're every Wednesday evening, and they're great introductory races, so would recommend them. Thanks to RGTDB for providing the results. Yeah, pretty close through there. You can see the Chris Little, Scott Crichton, Luke Jeffries, just a 1/4 of a second between those 3, and pretty even on the watts per kilo there as well, even though there were some downhill sections showing that there wasn't much draft benefit available today. So Tim Cook there slightly below, 2.75, he made the most of it and then picked his time to attack. But well done to our top 3. John Waddy rounding out the podium with his fairly solo ride. Managed to not lose his mind. A very tough mental battle when you're just riding on your own. So well done to all the riders. Well done to Derek Bucock for his great organisation. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I've been Mike Lister. I've been with my co-host Riley Harvey, who's going to sum up for us, and then we will sign off until next time. Thanks, everyone. Here's Riley.
Well, I'm pretty sure I called Paul Pudell on the line, but if I didn't, it's that long ago, no one will remember. So I'm going to say I went for Paul Pudell on the line. Standout rider for me was Chris Little. I think moderating his efforts and judging that ride really well. Lost his man, lost the group towards the beginning of the ride, but he didn't blow himself up. He rode at a pace he could continue with, and he caught up and passed some of the guys there. Fantastic riding from him, really good to see. Worth noting that this is a Magic Road ride, so you know, this is the sort of thing you could create for your own group, your own riders, your own friends. Any ride from around the world that you're interested in, you could do on your own trainer. Check out ZMS live stream for more excellent streams, and you can go back, look at historic streams that have been going on before, and also check out estv.co. That's Electronic Sports TV. And it's been great having you. Hope to see you for some more races.